Awesome. So like he said, my name is Amber Weber. I'm with the Rocky Mountain Farmers Union. I will be facilitating you all today, or trying to wrangle you all today. Just to let you know, we are recording this session. So just a heads up on that. You can put your questions in the chat. You can send them to all the panelists and all of that there, so we can make sure that we answer those. Wanted to remind you that if you are a business member of the grain chain, you are also a member of the Rocky Mountain Farmers Union, and the Farmers Union has a leadership summit. Just wanted to give you a couple event things right now. So tonight we have a Protecting Your Water and Resources. I can put my email and our link in the chat after I get done here. So if you want to join that, we have Representative Tatone on Friday at 1. And then retirement readiness and succession planning will also happen on Friday night. So if that interests you at all, please sign up for that. Your next grain homeschool will be March 10th at 11 a.m. Mountain Standard Time with Todd Olander, talking about malting, what it is and why it matters. But without further ado, we're going to introduce Mad Agriculture. They are a nonprofit based in Boulder who helps steward, design, and activate regenerative farm operations. From farm finance to new crop markets and to a community of change, Mad Ag helps farmers create ecological and financial wealth. Mad Agriculture's vision is to create a world where people, land, and sea thrive together for generations to come. They actively work with dozens of farmers across the country, including the Intermountain West and Upper Midwest, and soon the East Coast and Southeast, to design and activate regenerative farm systems. They have been working in the Front Range with many of the incredible players in the Colorado grain chain to try to bring a grain revival back to our landscapes. So today we have Jane and Phil, and I am going to turn it over to you guys. Thanks, guys, for coming.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Absolutely. We love the grain chain, the grain revival, and it's fun to see a lot of familiar faces, and excited to share what we're doing with all of you.
Yeah, I mean, maybe we can start with some quick introductions. You want to go for it?
Sure. Phil Taylor co-founded Mad Ag with my wife about 3 years ago. After a long sort of path through academia and global ecology and soil science and working across the world, I decided that it was time to get boots in the ground and hands dirty, helping farmers, in the communities that I enjoy and want to be a part of. And yeah, Mad Ag is relatively new, and I think we're finding a lot of resonance in our work, the work with you all, the folks that we have as partners on the call, and then also just across really the world at large. Just amazing how many people are focused on what I think of as sort of like the need for healing between ourselves and people and the world at large. And so for us, agriculture is really the starting point for that. Agriculture is where human health and the health of the planet intersect in the most profound and intimate ways. And so, our work is really about supporting and empowering farmers that have that shared ambition so that they can really thrive on the land. And we sort of have a variety of ways that we help support that, some of which we'll cover in our kind of grain revival talk.
Yeah, and I'll just add, I'm Jane Cavaniero. I've been kind of working as a project manager for a lot of our grain related work. So I'll just be kind of jumping in with some details about some of what we got into in the last 2 years. And so just for a general outline, we're going to start by telling you guys a little bit more about our story that Phil just kind of started with, dig into our framework a bit, and then show you a little bit about the last 2 years and the trials we've conducted, and talk a little bit about how we want to move forward with all this work and with all the amazing partners we've been working with so far.
Awesome. Yeah, so Mad Ag, at the heart of what we're trying to do is help create a regenerative revolution in agriculture. And that regenerative revolution, I think, looks different for a lot of people. We could probably talk a lot about what regeneration means, but for us, it's about, again, that any step toward healing your relationship to self or others or place is really the heart of it. About restoring, not only what was, but using new ideas and innovation and creativity and imagination to reimagine our relationship to Earth. And there's as we see it, kind of a nice balance of old and new in that. And we try to live, I think, boldly between the creative tensions that often dominate, the categories that polarize us. So it's not necessarily about local or global or bad or good or black or white or big or small. It's about really asking, what does that place and that community need us to be, and what's working. And so we try to really hold a pretty generous space for what wants to be born of a people and a place that's pursuing justice and equity. And that's kind of the way that we approach our work. Again, with a real orientation toward helping farmers. This is a picture I like to show because it looks like, parts of the US plains, but it actually was the Amazon. In my sort of prior work, I worked all over the world, studying global ecology, and spent a lot of time thinking about large commodities like palm oil and soybeans. And where I was working in Latin America, the landscapes were being transformed into these monocultures. This is a fleet of Cargill. Well, it's not Cargill that owns them, but this goes to the Cargill supply shed, ultimately providing soybeans for, raising pigs in China. And this was the Amazon. And the way that we've been developing our agricultural systems to feed the world has caused just an enormous amount of injustice and damage. Most of that damage is increasingly hidden from our consumption patterns. We've already turned the American prairie into grains, into corn and beans and soy. And those stories, that heritage, is largely forgotten. And I think, now more than ever in my life, I've been focusing on trying to understand my role in the colonization and my heritage and my multi-generational story of, being someone that's, I'm in Boulder. I'm fresh here. I've been here 12, 13 years. My story isn't here. What does it mean to belong to a place and honor the people that have been hurt in that process? And I just feel like these are the large questions that we all need to be grappling with, but are just so difficult to find traction and change with. But this picture for me exemplifies our approach to our relationship to Earth, with extraction and dominion and control, and also just the destruction hidden around global supply chains, and our need to really clarify those. As we do within, we do without. And I think the reflection of our style of relating to nature is also reflected in the ways our economies are failing in certain areas. Rural economies are suffering as well. From here where we live in Boulder to where I grew up in Maryland, the majority of small towns are boarded up. For us, my opinion is that sort of the consolidation, the aggregation, and corporate control of ag has really gutted rural America. And now those farmers are stuck between basically the brutality of two commodities, where they can't control their inputs, the cost of those inputs, and the system of those inputs, and the scaffolding of those inputs, like the US Farm Bill. And then the other side of that, just having no value for their crops on the other end because of they live and die by the Chicago Board of Trade and what insurance they have. So this is just how the state of the situation is grim, and how do we start imagining rural economy thriving in place again. For us, it's just kind of a riff on an Einstein quote. We can't solve problems using the same values and imagination we use to create them. And so for us, the old story that we have been living in is here on the left. This is the words, the systems, the language that has really defined, the expression of current human economy in relationship to the broader and bigger natural economy that we participate and rely and breathe in. And so for us, this new story, the power of language, the power of principles, the power of philosophy, we have to start there. They don't mean much unless we put them into action, which is the key. But we have to start through this kind of more radical imagination, being intentional about what we're creating, which can be really challenging. And so for us, this is represented in a shift from language, from quantity to quality, from monetary profit to building true wealth, from being more competitive and turfy to being more cooperative, from thinking about the short term to an intergenerational perspective. from focusing on the take and the extraction to the give, in that sense of greater reciprocity, and leaving a place better than we found it. How often do humans do that? Thinking about circular systems, decentralizing power, increasing diversity, thinking about restoration or regeneration, interbeing and empowerment, and really thinking of humans as more of a keystone species versus what we have been, which I think is more of an invasive species on Earth. So this is just a language set that I think puts into contrast the kinds of paradigms we're wrestling with and where we're hoping to go to.
Yeah, and I would just add that when you're thinking about the heritage grain movement, you can see a lot of these words coming up and why it's so valuable and why we want to be bringing those alternative grain varieties back to our landscapes.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I would challenge each of you to figure out and explore within yourself and your work where you find yourself working here. What language do you use? What systems are you designing? What partnerships are you striking? And how does it nurture the left or the right side of the screen here? This is kind of our framework of change. This is how we work with farmers, and we're just showing this because it'll help you understand how we work within the grain revival. The way that we work with farmers is not it's not really telling them what to do. It's about empowering and giving life to their vision. Our fundamental belief is that the power to transform the world is in the unrealized potential of every individual. It's a very grassroots approach of agency and empowerment. Farmers listen to farmers. Farmers of all people are independent and free and really embody that spirit. Not that they're not cooperative, but I think the level of creativity and freedom necessary to be a good farmer, we like to see ourselves coming alongside that and helping farmers sort of scrub the bulb off of their virtues and values and their vision so that they can find their best foot forward. And so we have our kind of inner work with everyone we work with is about sort of, as Alan Savory would say, it is really defining, discovering the holistic context. What's their resource base? What does their capital either restrict or allow? Who are the family of decision makers that really give shape to that operation and land? What are the constraints and the opportunities within that kind of kernel of essence? The second thing that we do is, from that kind of shared sense of values and vision, we then can help farmers decide and help understand where they can put a strategic step forward based on the resources that they have. So we use a framework called the Scale of Permanence, originally developed by this guy P.A. Yeoman out of Australia, where we can slow down and look at the dimensionality of a farm, which is really, really complex. It's an ecosystem, dynamic ecosystem in a place, moving through time. And so we walk through the strengths and weaknesses, the opportunities and the realms of the things that the farmer cannot change, the things that the farmer can change. And so things like climate are very difficult to change, even though we individually influence it. You really can't control that very much. We work through this kind of circle which allows us to look at the dimensionality of the farm. And we work through the climate all the way down to the soil, which is the foundation of that farm economy, looking for ways, the most important ways that a farm could design and operate in a regenerative way. What we've learned, and which is embodied in this outer circle, is that it's quite fun for a farmer to dream big about their place and their land. And it's really fun for us to support that visioning process. Yet, without considering the relationship between the farm and the world at large, that farm plan often just sits on a bookshelf in a binder, doesn't find the light of day, doesn't find life. And so there are three relationships that at Mad Ag we help farmers engage. And those are the three relationships are: what is your community of change? Who you surround yourself with is who you become in many ways. And so choosing the friends and the comrades that you spend in your time with, what movement are you living in beyond yourself, gives you meaning, it gives you purpose, gives you excitement. that's a big piece of what we try to steward and create for the farmers we work with that are often isolated. And I think that, I think of the Rocky Mountain Farmers Union, I think of the National Young Farmer Coalition, very much in the same way that creates a community of practice. Mad Ag intersects with those things and does our own work in that realm as well.
Hey, Phil.
Yeah. Andy, you went silent.
I'm thinking about how all of this has really come into fruition with your help in Boulder County, and thinking about Eric at Black Cat and the progress through the years, and some seed sharing and best practice sharing, and showing up to help in cleaning seeds. Do you, maybe this is a later conversation, but I'd love to hear more about specifically that partnership, because it seems like one that's really been had successful measurable outcomes.
Exactly. Yeah, we'll get to that in a second. I'm going to stream through this framework, and then I'll get into the nuts and bolts of what we're doing. I can talk. I'm loquacious. The second piece is access to money. Most money restricts what farmers can do from the community bank. We're changing that. And then access to markets. This is the big one. This is what Moxie does. This is what dry storage and freshly milled and all the restaurateurs and the bakers and pasta makers. This is the way that they can partner with farmers is not only paying a farmer the fair value for that crop, but telling their story and helping them enter the marketplace for consumers. So this is where it began. Our first real work. We did a little bit of work in 2018 with Black Cat. Really, really early stuff that I don't even remember what we did. But in 2019. We worked at Rich Andrews' farm and Masa Seed Foundation, and we planted out and tested 17 varieties.
Many of which we still keep around our office.
Yeah. These are like our $7,000 bouquets. All the time, labor, energy, transportation, seed cost, and essentially, what we tried to do in these plots was just to bring in everything that we could find that we felt like would be a good dryland varietal of heritage or ancient wheat for the production systems we were working in. We also focused on how to grow these. For us, what you grow is important, but how you grow it is as important. And so we tried intercropping with lentils. We tried intercropping with garbanzo beans. We tried undersowing with clover. Because wheat is a wonderful, beautiful plant, but it is a taker plant in the way that we think about it. It takes more than it gives. And so being thoughtful about your rotations and being thoughtful about how you produce it is as important to Mad Ag as anything. And so we played around with a lot of these plots and varieties. And
just some of these seed varieties, we had like a handful of seeds to begin with, and so the scale of it was incredibly small in a lot of cases. And so that year was really just about seeing what happened, what worked, what didn't. And Masa Seed Foundation was a really important partner in all of this, because they brought so much wisdom and knowledge about place-based varieties and tending to seeds. And so all that information that we gathered basically led to this event that we did with Andy and Moxie, and we were able to bake out 3 different varieties, and we were able to make pastas with 3 other varieties. And so that was kind of how we were able to wrap that first year of understanding and really bring ourselves into the 2020 season.
Yep. Yeah, this was just a really awesome event. It's amazing how much, that's where we got connected to the Jones family, working in the San Luis Valley. We ended up spending an entire year with them, helping them integrate cover crops, integrate livestock, think about intercropping, helping them with their marketing and their, beyond just the wheat in their potatoes. And so at this event, it's just amazing what one event can do for connections. This is where, Pacificio, they were able to actually learn and source and begin, sourcing regional grains from Lewis Family Farm. And so, I look forward to the post-COVID days where we can all gather at Moxie again and stuff into that little bakery and do this, more often, because it just yields such partnership and camaraderie around the movement.
Yeah, it was really catalytic for like just getting the excitement and energy of all the different potential players going. So yeah, hope to do that again soon. Maybe we can pause. Andy, I don't know if there are any like questions or anything that we've covered so far that you want to get deeper into.
Can you hear me? I'm unmuted.
Yeah.
I just want to make a comment, Phil, that it really, at the end of the day, is about coming together and sharing stories and experiences and making new friends and learning from each other. And that little Mad Ag Summit we had at Moxie was tremendous. And I didn't even know that all of those connections were made until you just mentioned it. You look at Pastificio, those guys are amazing. And they, have moved to a really unique grain blend in their pasta. They just took away 2 Good Food Awards, kind of the Grammys of the food world. Jones Family Farm is doing amazing work up in southern Colorado, and was just learned that their potatoes are being fed to the entire Boulder County School District. They're organic purple potatoes. And so I too really look forward to being in person and sharing, so thank you.
Yeah, and I would just mention, Black Cat, that my longest farm relationship in Boulder County is with Black Cat. It started because my son and Thatcher and Avery went to school together. And then as I was leaving academia, sort of looking for a way to put my tendrils back into the earth and work in farming, my initial Mad Ag 1.0 was actually an insect-based animal feed company. And during that whole time, I watched Eric start, sort of flirting with grains and buying combines. And that's actually how I was sort of introduced into the power of the kind of the grain revolution, was by being with Eric and being good friends with him. And we've tried, tons of different things over there. He's sort of the huckleberry farmer, that'll just do anything. And, some things are catastrophic failures. And, the guy is just an amazing amount of resilience for his ability to kind of pick his head up after failure at all levels. And he's just a dear friend and has been so important to the movement. He lives in the Front Range, and it's just worth kind of pointing that out.
Yeah. He's doing amazing work. And, he had a bumper harvest last year, and I've watched him go from, 1 to 2 to 4 to, maybe 5 acres. And, he had so much wheat last year that, Jane and I were cleaning it in the fall, and we realized that all of his bins were still full from past crop. So, that's sort of an exciting moment to see this grain chain really starting to firm up. And he's, one of maybe 20 folks who are involved in this grain chain circle closely. And there's many dozen more out there that we look forward to reaching and onboarding in the near future.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so maybe now we'll just talk a little bit about, some of the partnerships we had in 2020 and kind of clarify the role we've played in it. I think, we've been trying to define like how we can really add value to all of this and create momentum. And obviously at the heart of it, we see the farmers as being the center of all of this. And so, we've worked with all of these farms in different capacities in the last year. And we were able to help them in small to large ways, depending on the partner. But I thought we could just take some time to go through some of the different trials we were able to observe and be a part of, and take any questions that people have along the way. And maybe at the end, we'll get to how this is all kind of shifting towards our plan for 2021 and beyond, and how we kind of see our role kind of solidifying here in the community with the Colorado Grain Chain and everyone else involved.
That sounds great. And anybody out there, we've got about 40 participants online, which is great. You can go ahead and just put your questions in the chat, and we'll read them out here.
Okay, I don't see them, so if you just want to holler them out.
Yep, you guys do your thing, and we'll jump in as there's questions.
Good.
Cool.
Yeah, and this is just on the other end, their partners on every level of this, and from the processing to the markets. I think the beauty of how this has been able to work so far is that there have been so many different people working on all levels to really bring excitement to heritage grains. And so we've been one tiny piece of that, and we've worked with all these people in the last year or more to really start figuring out how we can scale this and make it something that farmers can be a part of in the long term.
Yep.
And then this is just kind of to show you guys some of the different roles we played for different farmers. We, didn't do this for every partnering farm, but we've kind of dabbled in, gathering data, helping farmers source seeds, because that can be a challenge, working to set up trials, giving, agronomic support, dealing with the, inevitable logistics coordinations that come out of it, and partnering with Ardent to try and get everything tested so we can, again, really understand what's happening on these different trials and how we can kind of take those learnings forward.
Yep. Yeah, it's been an amazing amount of logistics, just dealing with every farm has a unique variety, a unique, whether it's organic or non-organic, whether it's incredible the amount of work that it takes to stitch together everything from the seed, the variety, the soil, the bed prep, the monitoring and looking for disease, and looking at the harvest weights, the agronomics, and then moving that and harvesting it and then storing it in different totes. Some are 50-pound bags, some are 25 if they're smaller, some are totes and shipping containers, and then grain bins, and just matching the market and supply and demand is not something that we have a clean way of doing yet, but it's just been an extraordinarily complicated thing to do. And one of the things that we've really learned is that we've reached there's a huge chasm in the community for infrastructure that can process anything less than a semi-load. It takes us, Twin Peaks, Jim, who we're getting closer with, can process a semi-load, but if you want to plant anything less than 5 acres, you're doing a lot of manual cleaning, a lot of labor, a lot of time, and it's more of a passion project. And I think for a lot of farmers, it's unless you're selling at the farmer's market at $7, $8 a pound, that kind of thing, it becomes really, really difficult.
And it requires being like vertically integrated, having all of your own equipment.
Yep. So we're in the midst of trying to figure out what that kind of threshold is, because a lot of the growers we work with manage hundreds to thousands of acres. Part of our goal at Mad Ag is really to help farmers growing things at scale that usually feed animals, like corn and sugar beets and those kinds of things, to transition to growing crops for food, and re-regionalizing and decommodifying the food system. And so if we don't have something that they can plant that's 100 to 200 acres, it doesn't make sense for them. And so it's been a real challenge, to know how to scale. And this is where the Bay State Millings and the Ardents get really, it's really, maybe one way to say it, it's enticing to work with them, because they can take things at volume. And for us to build out the regional mill and sort of regional, decentralized, decommodified, re-regionalizing food system is going to just take a lot more sophisticated matching between volume and demand. And so that's an area where we would love to, collect ideas and hear what people are working on, and how people...
Can we chew on that for just a second?
Yeah.
So just looking over my shoulder, you can see a phrase we adopted from Phil, community, not commodity. And that's our slogan at the Colorado Grain Chain. So, Ardent Mills and Rocky Mountain Milling and all the big boys will play a great role. And that role will be, once we reinvigorate heirloom grain with the masses, they're well equipped to handle and distribute that. So that's the future I see. And they also have some great resources that they've loaned us along the way with testing, lab testing of wheat. But, if you look at the history of 100 years ago, there were over 25,000 mills in America. Now there's about 170, and most of them are really, really big. when you look even closer at what I liked your slide that showed a big monoculture. I didn't like it, but I enjoyed the thought of the airplane going over this big monocrop on the left, on the right, this beautiful farm that is probably somewhere nearby that has, small acreage of a bunch of different rotational crops. Getting back to how do we clean less than semi-loads of grain. A semi-load's 40,000 pounds. If you're getting 1,500 pounds or 1,500 pounds per acre, a 5-acre farm would never have enough grain to bring that down to Twin Peaks and Longmont.
Yeah.
We want to preserve identity of the grain, so we're not just going to go dump it in with a bunch of other farm grain to get cleaned. There's infrastructure in regard to sharing resources or purchasing your own resources. Can you speak a little bit of some of the challenges and the successes we've seen with growing this local grain chain and maybe, combine swapping and grain cleaning and stuff like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, it's been all across the board. I think most farmers are really, really happy to lend advice, lend equipment, lend experience, lend land. I mean, Black Cat in particular, I mean, first time you go there, you'll probably wind up driving a combine. That's just part of Eric's personality and his sort of freedom and generosity and his excitement about letting everyone participate. And I think that's been a kind of a hallmark of the movement is people's generosity, and sharing. And I think that's come a long way to helping us get where we are. The question that I'm seeing is like, how are we going to share storage, right? Like, who has storage and how are we going to share storage? How are we going to get a couple 4,000 bushel bins and an auger and a PTO engine or a tractor? Who's going to store, whose land is that going to be on? Is it a co-op? Is it someone own that infrastructure and then pays a tolling fee or rent? We just need something like that right now, because we have all these great grains and, a storage container out in Weld County, and a work pad with a bunch of frackers, and it's inconvenient. It's hard. We don't have a forklift, and so we're borrowing tractors and forklifts every time we go out there, and getting that cleaned and transported back to the storage container, it just takes days. And it's so our kind of crux point is like, how do we get that, maintain that community, maintain that identity preservation, maintain the governance and control on where these grains go, but without the capital, get the infrastructure to hold the storage, and that's for us in this year the kind of crux. If we can't figure that out, it really limits what we can do, because everything's in jeopardy. Right now, thank goodness there's no mice in our storage bin, but it's a lot less safe than a Meridian container or something like that. So, it's hard to know what to say because we're just trying to figure it out right now.
Yeah.
You look at, again, to keep picking on Eric at Black Cat for just doing a really, really good job of growing the grain chain here locally and inspiring other people and sharing his successes. Eric works really hard. He's, I bumped into him at a very off, a funny little farm auction one afternoon, and I was looking at a grain bin, and it was in the pile he had just bought, and he says, "Okay, shush, we're getting ready. This one tractor is great. I think I'm going to get it." And so I'm sitting there with him and my son, and we're bidding on tractors with Eric, and he got the grain bin for $500 or something like that.
Yeah.
Instead of $10,000. He rehabbed an old gleaner or an old combine in a very cost-effective way. He didn't go drop $380,000 on a John Deere for his 5 acres. He puts it all together with his own hands and his help, and he's able to keep his overhead down to the point where this is a profitable. It's at this point, it's not a trial. This is his business, and it's working. Yeah. So I think, being really conscientious about not over stretching your financial resources and regretting it. And then you look at all of the shared equipment, where people will drive a combine, again, Eric, an hour and a half on the other side of town to cut your wheat. Michelle Moffitt at Freshly Milled offering up her seed cleaner to a variety of people.
Yeah, that's been critical for us. And we've been at the back of her barn days on end on that little cleaner, and we've put hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pounds of stuff through that little cleaner. It's amazing what that's enabled. And again, generosity, support, passion, excitement. It's really cool.
And that seems like maybe, we went from having 0 mills to 3 mills in Boulder County. So we're rich in mills. We still are very short on kind of right-sized seed cleaning equipment. And so anybody on this call, if you're wondering where you might be able to play a role, let's have conversations around seed cleaning and a seed cleaning house that could be either a cooperative venture or could be something that is a pay as you go for farmers to show up and pay 20 cents a pound or whatever it might be to get their grain cleaned.
Yep. Exactly. We need that. And that's something where we're pushing into. I know there's a couple old clippers and some of the farmers that have been here, 4, 5, 6 generations that we work with. There's old clippers in the barns. They haven't been pulled out for a long time, but they're big and they can be used. It's just a matter of, where's that infrastructure sit? What's its condition? Where's it going to get housed? Who's going to manage it? All of that stuff is just kind of open opportunity and question.
We do have a couple questions in the chat, so we're going to pivot just a minute here. Chad is asking, do you anticipate the overall market will come to a consensus on what defines regenerative production, or expect fragmented perspectives to remain on what is marketed as and consumers consider regenerative?
I would say expect a fragmented definition for a long time to come. We're just seeing like General Mills release their own, Danone released their own, the regenerative organic certification released their own, Gabe Brown and the NRCS have released their own, and no one can really stop that sort of self-definition. And I think they really are in kind of the same spirit, and some are perhaps a little bit more enlightened than others, but I would say expect it to be fragmented.
I think the definition doesn't really serve like certifications as well, because regeneration is so place-based and outcome-oriented that it can become really challenging when you're trying to apply one definition across, all these different regions, ecosystems. It is already showing to be a bit of a challenge.
Yeah, we kind of hold multiple definitions, within the context that we're working in. It's in an effort not to demonize or judge or exclude. We sort of let that definition be flexible based on the folks that we work with and understand their journey and story and their intentions behind the concept, the principle, and putting that into action. So in some examples, we work with farmers to actually become regenerative organic certified, where regenerative does have a really specific definition. And in other cases, that's not the end goal, and it's much more a conversation and open-ended concept.
Absolutely. And then one last question from Bill. Do you have a program to scale up for new varieties from a handful of seeds to enough for 100 acres?
Oh, that's a great question. That program is ill-defined, but happening. Masa Seed Foundation is the seed steward. They also work with Bill McDorman from Rocky Mountain, forget the name of the institution.
Rocky Mountain Seed Alliance.
Rocky Mountain Seed Alliance. And so, yeah, we actually, these are all the different farms we were working on. Yeah, so this is actually, looking at the slide here, we grew out, I don't know, how many varieties did we grow with Masa Seed Foundation last year?
I mean, they had our 17 plus another like 20 to 30 of their own, including barleys and
exactly
oats and things like that.
Yeah, so Masa is really the seed steward around here, which is their larger ambition as well. And so we've worked with them to grow out, tons of different varieties. And then CSU, their experimental wheat division at the station. We hired them. I think it was like $1,200, and they brought their little experimental combine down, and they harvested it, in a day. And so there is a bit of a kind of experimental heritage wheat thing happening. Here are all the different varieties that are being grown out and tested. And I actually am going to be calling Rich this afternoon to sort of talk about what's the 2021 outlook. And I'm sure that in time he'll be offering these for sale through his foundation.
Awesome, thanks. You guys can continue with the rest of your presentation now. We'll stop bombarding you for
Cool.
a minute.
We will back up and just show you a little bit. These are the rolls. Here's Lewis Family Farm. So this is out in Adams County. This is Mark Lewis. We grew out these 5 varieties last year. These varieties have been sold to and moving through Moxie, through Pastificio, through maybe a few other outlets. And then most of it is actually being saved to plant out next year, 50 plus acres. So we had really great results. I mean, the protein levels, just look at the protein levels on all of these are extraordinary. And so in terms of kind of artisanal baking, all spring, they're all spring types. And so they end up being less hard and well suited for baking purposes. So we're kind of excited about this. All these varieties, especially the Durham is really, really, well, they're all beautiful. They're all cool. But this is some of the work we did at Lewis Family Farm.
The India Jammu was particularly amazing in our baking test. Jane and I were just blown away by how much extensibility and elasticity the gluten in there had, and the gas retaining properties when we mix the dough and we proof it, and the loaf just gets really big and beautiful and light and fluffy, which is what customers want.
Yeah.
So the India Jammu is in my sights for getting some more seed and seeing if we can maybe seed at a slightly higher rate and crowd out those weeds, up 120, 130 pounds per acre, just to see what it would do, maybe with a little bit of irrigation to start.
Yep. Yeah, we're going to be doing both of those things next year in Lewis Family Farm. We're going to probably bump up next month actually. Yeah. Bumping up all of our seeding rates above 100. Interplanting with clover, a low stature clover underneath most of it. And then he has a pivot. And so we'll be irrigating early on and turning off. So we're excited about that. It would be fun to plan a grain chain field day out here once we kind of reach a new normal with COVID.
Definitely.
And then here's just some of the pictures. This was custom cut by a local organic farmer because Mark doesn't have a combine. So that went really well, beautiful results. Dan Lisco, he's a multi-generational farmer here in Boulder County, owns Sombrero Ranch. We've been working with a cohort of 9 farmers to help transition them off of GM crops and neonic pesticides as a part of a Boulder County project. And in addition to doing that with corn and sugar beets, we are introducing new crops and markets and helping build those markets. And Dan is a fantastic wheat grower. He's grown for Ardent for decades. And we had some just fantastic result with these varieties and Dan.
Particularly in terms of yield.
Yeah, and the yield was it's fantastic. Again, not organic, and we're working on that, but he probably won't go to organic. That's not in his context. So we'll see what we end up doing with Dan in the years to come. Full Circle Farms. This is Dave Asbury. This was part of a trial with a ton of modern,
12 or so hybrids.
12 hybrids out of CSU and around the region. Dave has been growing organic for Bay State and Ardent for a long time. and we grew white Sonora with him, and ended up lodging quite a bit, but not lodging to a point where we couldn't lift it off the ground. Really low protein here. We're gonna see if undersowing with clover helps bump that up. Clover as a nitrogen fixer. There's a lot of data across the country that'll bump it up a whole percentage point if you co-plant, and so there's a way to bump protein. But Dave, was part of this project as when Blake Cooper at the county, who is a barley breeder, was still in his role there. He collaborated with us with Boulder County to kind of pull this off. This is the Mosso Seed Foundation work that we showed a little earlier. Some of the experimental work, really exciting stuff. Again, going from a fistful of seeds to 100 acres. That's the goal of that program.
Yeah, I would recommend getting out there, in July or August if you can. It's like the most beautiful farm I've ever seen.
Yeah.
It has hundreds of varieties growing out there, and Rich is just like a beacon of knowledge. So
Rich is looking for help cleaning seeds right now. They're out there. All the work of their growing season is now turning into cleaning seeds, and they welcome help. And I'll put an email for Laura, who's helping to coordinate the volunteer work out there. You can email Laura. It's in Boulder County. It's sort of on the south eastern part of Boulder, and you could spend what will be one of the sweetest afternoons in a long time on the farm with Rich.
Yep.
yes, do it.
Yeah, he's a true elder of the movement. He's been with seed for decades, and he offers a lot more than just cleaning. It's pretty incredible to get to know Rich and his story and his work, and the rest of the team there as well, Daniel and company. So this is freshly milled, and Michelle with obviously the seed cleaner that she has brought to the community and that a lot of us have used.
She had her own experiment going on, and we kind of visited towards the end and gathered a little bit of data.
Mm-hmm.
But mostly we partnered with her in the cleaning capacity. We have a picture of the clipper, I think. Yeah.
Here's Black Hat, what they were doing this year. Again, just interaction was more on the testing side of things. We weren't as close to the kind of on-farm implementation with Black Hat this year, but have been close historically to that.
Mm-hmm.
Here's seed cleaning. Here's the little clipper that has been used by our team for days on end, and again, not big enough to move, more than 10 acres, but a really, really critical resource that has helped move a lot of grain this year and in years to come.
Yeah.
Just some shots.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just pictures of the work.
Yeah.
And then, Moxie bread, freshly milled, dry storage, Pachaficio are at the helm of buying all of the stuff that we're stewarding. I know there's many, many more buyers throughout the Denver and Colorado region, but these are the primary folks that we work with in actually getting the grain sold and returning money back to the farm for all the work and the value.
Okay.
Yeah, that's okay. And then 2021, we're going to be doing a little bit more focusing. Our farms are going to be working with Lewis Family Farm more deeply, possibly with Dan Lisco, and then Jones Farms Organics. Those are going to be our kind of primary farms that we're working with. And I'm sure that we'll end up doing more in the end.
I think we're looking for broader ways to kind of collect data and collective knowledge across other people's work with all this. And so that's still kind of up in the air, and we're working with Andy, hopefully, to figure out kind of a system that'll work for all the growers.
Yep. And we kind of, we like this kind of middle spot where, our organization is really focused on helping farmers kind of exit the industrial system. So farmers that are selling into commodity markets and are looking, there's sort of like there's a big chasm. It's like the farmers of the middle. They've been left behind by the industrialization and consolidation of rural American ag. and they still are family owned. They're still family operated, but they don't have direct access to markets and consumers and the purchasing power of, progressive, enlightened consumers. And so what we are really, our goal is really to offer an off ramp out of that industrial ag. And so for us, if we can, these farmers often are isolated, they're rural, they don't have those direct access, and that's where we find the most power to connect the dots. And so for a farmer that's used to selling a pound of wheat for 4.5 to 8 cents a pound, if we can help them sell it for 35 or 40 or 50 cents a pound, even up to $1, is like such an incredible financial win for that farmer. And that's part of the way that we think about it agronomically. It's also part of how we think about where our work is moving and headed, because Mad Ag is now working across the Midwest with a lot of farmers in the same situation. And so a lot of the farmers that have come from the more farm market, like Aspen Moon and Black Cat, who have access to that consumer base, we love and adore them, and they're close allies and friends, but we're going to be doing less work with them and more work with the folks that are isolated and usually operating on hundreds to thousands of acres, trying to move things at a larger scale.
And there is a lot of interest in that, as much as I find myself stopping by and visiting with wonderful local farms here in Boulder County. We've been working with a handful of farmers further away in eastern Colorado that are commercial, conventional, modern wheat farmers. This sort of kind of more Dan Lisco, multi-generational farmers who are really getting interested in what value can be added to not only their farm finances by getting $1 a pound or 50 cents a pound, but interested in being a part of a community again and showing up at a farmer's market or showing up at a pasta shop or a bakery and dropping off their grain that they've poured their heart into, and then eating some pasta or bread or maybe whiskey, Phil.
A little bit.
I think a lot of these guys are kind of they're starting to wake up and say, wow, Jesus, a bushel of wheat went for $4.75 a bushel in 1975, which is what it's going for in 2021, right? Yep. That is not, as you say, community, not commodity. We've got to unravel this commodity system that's making us sick, making our economic infrastructure not work. So it's exciting. And I think people should also be understanding that we need to pay more for good food, and we need to give the farmer more than the 8 or 12 cents a pound and incentivize them for their hard work and their input.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that's exactly what we're into. And, that's the challenge of those infrastructure pieces and those scaling pieces that we've been wrestling with. And it's why we're trying to operate in that middle zone where that little clipper can't move 20,000 pounds, unless you have a team of people, but who can afford to pay someone, weeks on end to that's where you get the real challenges for us is to, how do we take Jones Family Farm, who's hundreds of acres under pivot, and really get them to move the needle on what they're growing and how they're growing. And they already are on so many levels. They're kind of an exemplary example of someone that's decommodifying at scale, but what can we learn from them, and how can other farmers participate in the same kind of change we're all trying to create?
And are you guys available? I mean, I kind of feel like you guys are like the fairy godmothers of that float in between the food makers and the and some policy makers and farm. If somebody was looking for some help, are you guys available? Do they email you? We just recently connected a friend in Texas who I think is on this call and was trying to rehabilitate some lands. Do you charge for that service? What does that look like?
We're just figuring it out. I mean, the answer is yes. Please connect. We want to help. For now, our bandwidth is so full with projects across the country that oftentimes it'll be a short phone call with like giving people the right direction that we feel like we code discovered in the call. It's like, okay, given all that said, why don't you try this, or why don't you kind of go up that creek, this creek, and let's circle back. Our sort of deep farm service and planning stuff is really, we're just gobbled up. We need to hire more people and grow, and we're in the midst of that, the challenge of doing that as an organization. So yes, don't hesitate to reach out. Can we help you at length? Probably not, but can we have a phone call and try to figure out what the best next steps are? Definitely.
And we'll have more capacity in years to come.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, we're really kind of hyper focused on the things that we've committed to this year, which is a lot. And we hope to build more capacity to serve all the need in the future. So but there's a bunch of other great people doing this work, and in many cases, if you're not in the local area and you're afar, they're actually better people than us well suited to help you. So and we might know them, and that's the beautiful thing about the Grand Revival, is that it's happening from the ground up all over the country, and there's a lot of lessons to learn and a lot of people to connect with to get your needs kind of your needs met. So in many ways we see ourselves as a connector among like-minded people, and so at the very least, I think those kinds of things will happen with anyone that reaches out and connects.
There was a comment made by a woman who is doing a story on the local grain chain, and she was talking to Pastificio and Rich and Michelle and a bunch of folks, and she sent us an email yesterday, and she said, it is remarkable, the spirit of cooperation, and everybody's like knows everybody's like hanging out with each other's kids, playing music, and COVID friendly music and hanging out and stuff like that. But it is so true. The spirit of collaboration is, I can't think of a farm or a restaurant that I've showed up to that I haven't been welcomed with open arms. And that is what has been a real accelerator for this in the past couple of years.
Right. Yeah. And that's such an intangible quality too. And something that has just kind of grown in place. And so we're very grateful that that exists here. And it's the only reason we're able to do the work we do here.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. No, that's the best part. The humanity of it, the relationships, the joy of playing music and eating pizzas and making it happen and testing and supporting each other. I mean, that's is that the cue?
Play us out.
Phil, it's funny that you mentioned music. I've had the opportunity to pluck the 5-string banjo with you on more than one occasion, and also sip some heirloom wheat spirits. So Phil and I are in a band. We dug up a couple rock stars, one of them being James Brown. Has anybody heard of James Brown? You could raise your hand if you have. So James Brown is a white man in Austin, Texas, not the musician James Brown, but the miller James Brown, who happens to be a musician, owns Barton Springs Mills. He is our guitar player. He's a rock star. And then we've got Liz Carlisle of the Lentil Underground, which is a must read. And then Phil and myself. So our band's called the Grain Chain Revival. And we were hoping we could use this opportunity to crowdsource a jingle. I'll lead off with just what a jingle might look like, but ultimately we will be performing this jingle in April at the Grain School Forum. So I'm going to kick it off, and then maybe Phil, you've got a few frailing thoughts on the matter. So here we go.
We'll see. Yeah.
Good grain, high grain, Saturday afternoon. Good grain, high grain, Saturday afternoon. Talking about you. Something like that. I'm just,
Grain chain on my grain chain. Grain chain on my grain chain. Grain chain on my grain chain. It's all about the grain chain. I don't know. That's pretty weak.
I hear it, and the lights are so bright, but the front 2 rows are going crazy right now.
Yeah, I can feel it.
Throwing stuff in the air.
I got to work on my. Next time, let's have a follow up. We should have band practice on the next Grain Chain. Get the whole community, whoever. Someone wants the fretless. We need the
fretless banjo for sure.
It needs to be a symphony, Grain Chain symphony.
we're going to go ahead and donate a bottle of dryland distillings Intero wheat whiskey to whoever wants to contribute something to the jingle. Just maybe record something on your phone. You could send it into me or Phil, and we look forward to that.
How about you guys put your emails in the chat really quick? There's a couple people who are interested in trying out yodeling and harp, you name it. So maybe you guys can put your emails in the chat. They can reach out to you about the band, but also potentially about the topic that we talked about today. It is noon. Thank you all for being on today. We appreciate it. We will see you all next time on March 10th, 11 a.m. Bye, guys.
Thank you, guys. Thanks, Phil. Thanks, Jane.
Thanks.